if you add up the market capitalization of every gold producer on the planet, it still doesn't even get close to Apple's cash on hand on the balance sheet. Doesn't even get close. But there is, you're starting to see some of the hedge funds and major, the individuals around the world start to enter into the gold market. I'm talking, for example, Warren Buffett, Berkshire Hathaway last spring. He made a half a $1 billion investment into Barrick Gold. There is, and he was probably the #1 anti-gold bug on the planet. Even he got into the spirit of gold.
Hey everybody, this is Rob Keentz with GoldSilverPros.com. We're recording this on Wednesday, December 8th, 2021. You guys will see it out on the channel tomorrow. I've got a returning guest to the program. You saw him last week, Ian from Ark Silver, and you also saw him when we did the interview with the National Investor as well from the New Orleans Investment Conference. We also have first-time guest, Jim Forsyth, who is founder of SilverBack Metals and also the CEO of St. James Gold, George Drazenovich. Will I say your name correctly? Thank you, everybody, for joining.
You did, Rob. Thank you.
Got it. I was practicing that before the video. Make sure I got it correct.
It's an odd last name.
Having a German background, you think that I could pronounce difficult names, but I really struggle with it. I guess I'm a Texan at heart. So everybody, welcome to the program. We wanted to talk about precious metals today. This is going to be a roundtable talking about that in the markets and kind of maybe a look forward to 2022 as well, since we're near the end of the year. I want to kind of look ahead and get people's opinions on what they think the market may look like. So I wanted to open with you, Jim. And before I do, I'm going to give a little bit of your background. I'm just going to read it right off of the description of your interview with Palisades Gold Radio. You're a Cornell graduate who studied Russian engineering and visited the Soviet Union in '84 and '86. It's cemented your strong belief, those trips in the free markets. You also flew KC-135s in the Air Force and taught at the Air Force Academy after receiving your PhD in aerospace engineering. You're also a small business owner in New Hampshire. You campaigned for Ron Paul in the 2008 election, and you were elected to the New Hampshire Senate, and as a prime sponsor, passed education tax credits and medical marijuana, and you served as a New Hampshire campaign chair for Dr. Paul. Did I get all of that correct?
Yeah, that's great.
That's an awesome background. So with your political background, how did you really get into gold and silver? What led you down that path?
Dr. Paul definitely did. So, visiting the Soviet Union made me a big believer in free markets, but I didn't understand the monetary side of that, money is half of every transaction. And if it's manipulated through artificial interest rates and it's not backed by sound money, then basically you can't really have a free economy. And Dr. Paul's the one that educated me on that. Plus, once I got to know him and saw the Austrian Economics School, then I started reading, Hazlitt and Mises and others.
Yeah. And, I have a technical background as well. I have a master's in information assurance, which is basically a computer science degree. And it's funny how we go from one of these type of technical disciplines to talking about the economy. How did you kind of switch over to getting interested in economic concepts? Was it basically just your time in politics and then, visiting as well? Or did you have had you had an interest in the economy in general beforehand?
Yeah, I had interest in essentially free markets, which is, should be the basis of the economy. Right. Due to, I almost got a Soviet studies degree, actually. I was going to get a dual degree. But that experience and my understanding of communism and just seeing that lack of freedom in people's eyes and the poverty that it created, but then the immense wealth for the people at the top, just always really made me think about free markets. That filters over into macroeconomics and trying to get the big picture of where we're headed, which is, I remember my Russian teacher, back in '82 was like, the Soviet Union is going to collapse within 20 years. And at the time, people didn't think that, but he was well studied and he understood that, the monetary system would collapse. And, now Putin's turning around telling us that our monetary system is going to collapse. And I think he's right. And I remember Dr. Paul said that in 2008 when I got to know him, that we're headed towards a Soviet style collapse. And this is a 100-year cycle that we're coming up on, and that's why I quit my job to work full time on Citizens for Sound Money, and then trying to make some money on the side with SilverBack Precious Metals to provide people low cost silver through kind of an arbitrage opportunity. Because I think it's time that something's got to get done to basically pave a better way for people. I mean, we've been hit with this since 71. You look at WTF 71 and how the disparity of income, the middle class is stagnated. We've been paying the price, but I'm actually very optimistic. There's a lot of doom and gloom, but I'm like, the time has finally come to make a switch, and we don't even have to have government approval to make that switch. There's with a blockchain.
It's already in the Constitution. I'd like to point out that gold and silver are legal tender, right?
Absolutely. I mean, we need to get them to repeal the tax on it. But other than that, you thanks to the blockchain, you can start using gold and silver as money today, and that's what our nonprofit advocates.
So George, I wanted to turn to you for a minute. I'm going to read a little bit of your background so that people will know a little bit more about you. You're an entrepreneur who has incubated startup ventures in a variety of sectors, including alternative energy, pharmaceuticals, technology, and natural resources. You're a CFO, director, and consultant for several junior publicly traded resource companies, including St. James Gold. And you have business development, planning, securities, regulatory experience in the Canadian US exchanges. You have exposure to battery technology opportunities and led a biopharmaceutical startup. So you have a wide-ranging background as an entrepreneur and in management. What drew you to St. James Gold, and what drew you to the precious metals?
I'll also just jump in there. I'm also the chair of the university over here in Vancouver. We actually have the largest MBA program in the country.
Awesome.
But yeah, I'm not academically, background in finance, taught the CFA for a decade or so. But, I'm going to go on Jim's premise here, because I really think it's really important here. It hasn't gotten a lot of play, or as much as I think it would have. We know about the supply, the demand for possibly gold based on inflation and debt. We're not going to get into that. But what I don't think has been talked about much is about the supply side of gold. It's ironic, but I think in the United States, you have political risk that is unprecedented. When I was going through, my studies, I was looking at political risk being Africa and Asia, not the United States. And that's important, because when you're looking for new gold discoveries, where are you going to go? Right? There's a big trend against mining. Well, of course, we know what's happening in the oil and gas sector in the United States. And I have a history of incubating startups in oil and gas. But the risk there now, with federal leases, you can't drill anymore, and that's a problem. And I think the trend line is toward is against mining. So if you're looking at new discoveries, and I'm the gold sector as a CEO of St. James, where are you going to find these new discoveries? The grades are collapsing around the world. They're collapsing about 50% in the past decade or so. So you have to dig deeper. It's more expensive. Finding new gold is more riskier. It's more expensive. So where are you going to go? Right? You're not going to go to the United States like you did perhaps in the past. You're not going to go to Africa. There's only a couple jurisdictions around the world that I think are mining friendly, and that's really Canada, the Yukon and Newfoundland. I'll give you an example. Victoria Gold. Victoria Gold is Canada's largest, newest mine. They're seeking to be a tier 1 mine. They're in Newfoundland. They are they're in the Yukon. They are the second largest employer in the territory of the Yukon, right behind the government itself. So, you have to look at where are you going to look for new discoveries, and that pie is shrinking.
And George, and we know Otavio Acosta, who we interviewed in New Orleans from Crescat Capital, has this great chart out, I think from December of last year, was it? The coming gold cliff. So starting in 2027 and especially in 2030, the proven probable reserves around the world literally fall off a cliff. You can see it on the chart. So, and it takes, 5 to 7 to 8 years to get a new mine really up and running and producing. So given what you said, given we have this coming gold cliff, and then we don't have the current proven and probable ounces coming up through the pipeline, how is that going to affect gold here at the end of this decade? What's going to happen to the price based upon the available supply?
You have economics 101, the demand for gold the increasing mistrust of government,
Mhm.
and the ways to look at hedging that expectation. That's that leads us to cryptocurrency and
Mhm.
other historical stores of value, gold, silver, precious metals. So the demand is going through the roof. You have supply just absolutely disintegrating, capitulating. I don't think you have to be a rocket scientist to figure this out. No disrespect, Jim, but you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out, where gold is going to go. The only question that I see with gold and precious metals and silver is that when are you going to realize these pops in prices? And I think, the underlying premise that I see is that gold and precious metals, they operate in super cycles. In the 1970s, the 2000s. You can't, it's difficult to time exactly when it's going to happen, but if you're a believer in gold exploration, silver exploration, to get to a mine, it's going to take you many, many years. But if you're on the ascendancy of this wave of gold and precious metals, whether or not you're off by 1 or 2 years doesn't matter. You want to be in the right sector for a longer period of time. And I think the precious metal sector is absolutely one of the easiest trades I've ever seen in my lifetime.
I agree with you. When I started Gold Silver Pros in 2018, I had written research pieces dating back to 2009. The first thing I ever published was my book, Drop Shadow. And then I started writing for Seeking Alpha and a lot of other online outlets and got syndicated. And I just knew, after about 7-8 years of writing, I looked at the gold sector and I said, this is going to be the most explosive gold bull market I think I've ever seen, on the charts dating back at least 100 years prior to the creation of the Federal Reserve. And that's why I started Gold Silver Pros. I'm so bullish on it. And you're right, we can't exactly time it. Sometimes the gold market's a little soft like it is right now, but that doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. We're looking at long-term historical cycle trading. Gold and silver are going to be extremely valuable, especially due to cliffs that we're talking about, supply cliffs. I want to turn to Ian for a moment. You run Ark Silver. One of the reasons you started it, you had a background in construction. You saw what was going on. You were alarmed, right? And so you wanted to start a company that could provide silver to people at lowest cost, that more and more people could get into silver. We talked about the gold cliff coming here in a few years. I think we're already at the silver cliff. Talk a little bit about, supply and demand in silver.
Yeah, I mean, silver, it's poor man's gold. So I believe everybody who has got half a brain is going to do the math and start moving into silver, but it's such a tiny market. Mm-hmm. Because it's such a tiny market, it's being and is being so successfully manipulated. And you've got the big players, we all know who they are, repeatedly rinse and repeat, and they win on both sides of the deal, and they're continually suppressing the price because it's such a small market. But that's its Achilles heel, because it's such a small, tiny market. We have multiple individuals in my neighborhood who could buy the whole annual mine production if they wanted to. Mm-hmm. Individuals. So around the world, there may be 1,000 people who could buy the whole annual market. So and look what happened to copper a few weeks ago in London. One firm came in and bought all of the physical copper. They paid a huge premium. They cleared it out, took the lot. Futures spike. This is going to happen on silver. There's enough people know about it now. Mm-hmm. That if just modestly increasing their positions, it's going to just bring that sort of supply demand cliff, and we're going to find out the value of silver.
Yeah, gold and silver both have industrial demand. Silver's a little bit more industrial in that it's used, well, not a little bit, it's quite a bit more. Most silver used today is industrial purposes, talking the military, electronics, everything that we use to do this broadcast, the internet. I used to work for a telecom, and tremendous amounts of both copper and silver get used there, as well as gold. And a lot of people don't know that, but gold gets used in a lot of highly reliable contacts, computer main boards, and things like that. So it's not just an investment metal. So I'm looking at this, I'm looking at supply shortages, and I talk about supply chain on the channel all the time. And one thing I noted in our session in New Orleans, our private after hours session, was we're not getting enough money into mining. So I wanted to turn to George here for a moment. I know you teach at the school, you're an entrepreneur, you understand supply chains. What's going to happen if we don't get an uptick in people investing in the miners? Are we even going to have ounces in the ground that we could somewhat quickly get to, or are we going to be scrambling just go around the world trying to find, the precious metals?
I want to build on Ian's comment because, and Rob, this is really a key aspect. When I look at the precious metals market, I look at three factors, right? The demand, right? The here in Canada, our national debt was doubled in the past couple of years, and it took us over 100 years to get to that level. And that's just the federal level. You got provincial, state levels, municipal levels, corporate debt, individual debt, small business debt, credit card debt. I mean, this is unprecedented. There's no notebook that talks about this level of debt. So, you can manipulate interest rates temporarily. They may go up a little bit, but you're going to have Armageddon if they get out of control with interest rate increases. So the only alternative, the central banks and governments have put themselves in a box. Is inflation, and hedge against inflation is the precious metals. But that's the demand. But the supply as well is shrinking. It's harder to get to these resources. When you do, these deposits lower grade. But the third aspect, I want to build on what Ian was saying, was that you have sector rotation, that market dynamics that impact the price of precious metals, silver and gold. Give you context, if you add up the market capitalization of every gold producer on the planet, it still doesn't even get close to Apple's cash on hand on the balance sheet. Doesn't even get close. But you're starting to see some of the hedge funds and major the individuals around the world start to enter into the gold market. I'm talking, for example, Warren Buffett, Berkshire Hathaway last spring. He made a half a $1 billion investment into Barrick Gold. There is, and he was probably the number one anti-gold bug on the planet. Even he got into, the spirit of gold. So I think all it takes, and I think it will happen. It's just a matter of when money starts to rotate from these technology companies and so forth into the gold precious market. It's going to be extraordinary, because you're going to have a lot of dollars chasing very few companies. And I think that's going to impact the precious, specifically gold and silver, unlike anything we've seen before. So you look at price of gold. I'm not really looking at the price of gold really much as a beta. I think the beta of silver and gold stocks, that's where the wealth generation for the retail investor is. I think if you want to diversify your portfolio, investing in the hard assets is a great idea. But if you're looking for this exceptional 20, 30, 41 return, the juniors, I think, is the play here.
Yeah, the junior market is one that gets supercharged in a bull market. So a lot of times you look at silver and gold juniors, that price goes up by, say, 4 to 5 to 6 to 7%, and you'll see the juniors jump a lot. Junior producers, even exploration companies, because it increases the value of what they hold in the ground. So as long as you have any resources or reserves in the ground, you get bid up. You don't even have to be in production. And we've seen that happen before. We've seen the last time silver ran up to $50, there was an explosion. The silver stocks, gold went to 1900 back in 2011. There was an explosion in the gold stocks. One thing that hasn't happened this time with our recent US dollar high in gold of about 2060 last year, the gold and silver stocks didn't catch up. And I've shown this graph a lot, where you look at the cup and handle pattern of gold, and then the miners are lagging that. So George, do you think that there is some general disinterest in like the generalists going into gold and silver stocks right now? And do you think that would change, for example, if we hit, a major economic event?
I look at the math. I look at the math, and I look at the demand, the supply, the potential for sector rotation. I can't time the market. Anybody who believes they can time the market, I think it's a fool's game. Yeah. All I do know is that gold and the precious metals operates in a super cycle. Super cycles being 10 years plus. Right. And if you can get in early in one of these super cycles, whether or not you time it off by 1 or 2 years, it really doesn't matter ultimately at the end of the day. I do think some of the oxygen for the precious metals market has been taken from the technology cryptocurrency sector. I think they're complementary. I think they're similar, but they also have their differences. But I think I go down to the underlying fundamentals, the trend lines, which is there's a growing mistrust of government. Supply of these resources are dwindling, finding new resources becoming more expensive. The demand for these precious metals is greater. I mean, these headwinds are too strong, to be denied over the longer term.
I agree with you. And I think we know the story of 2021, and I'll sum it up real quick. Inflation resulting from money printing around the world, the highest print in the US in 30 years last month. We're going to get by the time this video comes out, or pretty close to, we'll get the new CPI print in the US. Inflation, supply chain shortages across the supply, not just precious metals, but across the supply chain. A weak job growth in the US. It's not looking super robust, right? But, I think that's a positive environment for precious metals overall. I wanted to get your opinion, Jim. What is your view for 2022? What do you see maybe happening? Do you think it's going to be a continuation in 2021? Do you think we'll have an economic recovery, higher GDP, or what do you think is going to happen?
Well, I'm really awful at timing.
Of course,
I was in this sector, in 2007 and 8, all the way through 11. But
yeah.
But if you look at, you're talking about the money printing, it was 25% more in the first year M2 grew by, and then it annualized at like 13% now. And inflation's only ticked up to 6.5% because at the same time, the economy slowed. If the economy were healthy, that inflation would be through the roof. And the money that's been printed, it hasn't all turned into inflation yet, but it's there waiting is the way I think about it. I mean, all inflationary phenomenon are based on money printing. Tulip mania was a matter of the banks printing money. It's just, you don't know where it's going to find an outlet, what prices are going to go up. That's going to depend on supply chains, but the fact they're going up is driven by that money printing. So I definitely expect to see, inflation continue to grow. I think, the Fed's way behind the curve in terms of, I mean, when they're talking about tapering, they're not talking about reducing their balance sheet. They're just slowing the rate of growth of their balance sheet. Right. And there's a limit to that because, foreign countries are not buying bonds anymore, not to the extent they were. And, so the financing our debt is all going to be on larger and larger is going to be on the Fed to do. So I don't see how they're going to be able to stop buying bonds without interest rates going through the roof. And once they go through the roof, we can't service our debt, which is 130% of GDP. So the big event that I think is going to happen at some point is Gresham's law kicking in, which is, bad money drives out good, which is where people start to sense the inflation, the severity of it, and start getting out of that currency like we saw in Turkey recently. And that's something that can happen very, very quickly. It can grow out of hand very quickly. And if you look at the Weimar Germany on a log chart, it's a parabola, which for people that know math is a scary thing. That means, it's not just going up exponentially. Money printing is probably exponential, but then that parabola on that chart is Gresham's law kicking in and starting to dump the dollars. Now, I don't think what happened in Weimar is going to happen to us, because as the world reserve currencies, the world is going to say, you've got to fix this. But I think we'll start heading in that direction. I think they're going to wait, in terms of governments, central banks doing something, backing it with gold. They're not going to do it willingly. They're only going to do it when they have to. When they have to, it's going to be pretty painful. So I just urge people to get in before that happens.
Yeah, and with respect to debt to GDP, you mentioned we're at 130% right now. I think Kenneth Rogoff of Harvard University wrote a book around doing a study of previous economies, and they came with the number 90%. Once you get to 90% of debt to GDP, that currency never really recovers, and that debt system never really recovers. It has to go through a restructuring or a reset, if you will. We're way past that. We've been past that for years. So I feel like we're just kind of waiting for this zombie debt-ridden system in the U.S. to flip that switch and for it to reset. Okay, predictions for 2022. Ian, what are your thoughts?
I'd just like to rewind a little bit about inflation, because people say inflation is the rise of costs of goods and services. Flatly, that is incorrect. Inflation is the abnormal increase in the money supply.
That's right.
So the inflation has happened. It can take up to 2 years to filter through. We are going to have 25% inflation, i.e. that's the rise in cost of goods and services in the US next year. Europe is producers' input costs are running at 22% on average in the Eurozone now. If you look at Turkey, I think it's like 170. Spain is in the 30s. We're not far behind. the dollar's going to collapse a lot quicker than people realize, because basically it's the petrodollar backed by force. Now, undoubtedly, the US military is the biggest and the finest in the world. And I'm sure Jim could tell us a lot more about it. It's immense and amazing. But it only works when you can pay the people who work in it something they can eat or pay their rent or live on. We're going to come rapidly to the point where the debasement of the dollar is not going to allow government to function. So it doesn't matter how big and how amazing your military is, if you can't pay the personnel, it won't work. So historically, the US has used force to compel the use of the dollar in trading oil in particular. That's breaking down already, with India, China, and Russia are outside of that system completely now, trading in oil. Now, these things happen rapidly. It's going to embolden other nations, because previously, when a nation decided to try and sell their oil for anything but dollars, they were invaded and basically. The leader died. That was the pattern. Well, that's not going to work anymore.
You know, that's what happened to Rome. They couldn't pay their soldiers, and a lot of soldiers started deserting.
Well,
and they
were paying them, but it was base metal. They were calling it silver, but it went to virtually zero silver content.
Took the zero out of the denarius, and there's a good story on that in a Rome series on HBO. I wish they had taken it a third season, but it's such a great series. My friend David Kranzler is one of his favorite series. But they talk about the debasement of the currency and its role in the debasement or the fall of Rome.
And look what happened in Rome. So the Western Roman Empire fell. But the Eastern, the Byzantine, went onto a gold standard and carried on for 1,000 years and were never invaded.
It sounds like they made the right choice.
We have a model.
That's right. George, reflections on this year or thoughts about 2022, either one?
I do believe that governments around the world will continue to be printing money. I think the only way change is going to happen is when it's forced upon governments. I don't see any political wherewithal or appetite to restrain spending anywhere around the world, even in Germany. They have a history of inflation. They understand that they're still printing money as well and increasing their debt. So I don't see it changing. I don't see anything happening until something bad happens. And I'm not looking forward to that, but I'm not going to pretend to know what happens in 2022, but I do know over the next few years and then some, I think the precious metals is the market to be in.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Without question.
Yeah.
So you do run a precious metals company. Let's talk about St. James Gold. You have the Florin Gold Project, which is your flagship in the Yukon Territory. Tell us a little bit about that project.
Yeah, our project is we're backstopped by a 2.5 million ounce inferred resource, and over the next few years, we're looking to drill tens of thousands of meters of drilling. To get to feasibility. That's our goal. That's our intent. We have 22,000 acres in total and only 17,000 meters of drilling. Our neighbors have drilled hundreds of thousands of meters. And I alluded to Victoria Gold, 30 kilometers away. They're Canada's newest mine. Slated to produce about 250,000 ounces of gold per year for the next 10 years. So we're in a great area, great jurisdiction. As I alluded to earlier, I think the Yukon is one of the best jurisdictions on the planet for gold exploration. It's the historical, part of the historical Klondike gold rush. So we're very excited about that project. But speaking of gold rushes, Canada's newest gold rush, and I would argue one of the world's newest gold rushes, is in Newfoundland, central Newfoundland, and we're in a sweet spot adjacent to Newfound Gold and Marathon Gold. We have a couple projects adjacent to them on trend, so we're very excited about those projects as well.
Yeah, the Yukon Territory is also on the show here in the States called Gold Rush on Discovery Channel. It's one of my favorites. It's not the scale of mining that you guys do, but they talk about people that are going out there getting those deposits, and it is an historic area. A lot of miners go out there, big and small, to do projects, and definitely a great historic district. You guys trade on the Toronto Stock Exchange Venture. You trade on the OTCQB market here in the US and in Germany. We'll put those tickers down to your company below if people want to check out more about you. And of course, we're going to add you guys to our mining stock tracker for those that support us on Patreon. We'll be covering St. James here as well for those interested. Wanted to turn to both Jim and Ian. I think you guys have a partnership going between SilverBack and Ark Silver. Why don't you guys tell us a little bit about that?
Shall I go first, Jim?
Sure.
Yeah. Jim and I met at the New Orleans conference, and straight away I knew he was a man of character and integrity. I had no idea about his background. I only found out recently reading the Who Are We on the Citizens for Sound Money. And so he's very modest, but an incredibly intelligent guy, but we both have a passion for silver. I have access to the 1,000-ounce bars at very good prices, and Jim likes cutting them up and selling the pieces. So it's an ideal partnership that we just evolved literally over the last few days. So very exciting that I can supply and build his inventory so he can have a large catalog of bars in the pipeline so people can select a large range. And also he's about to fairly shortly start manufacturing 10-ounce bars and cast bars and personalize them. So I'm excited. We're toing and froing of ideas. We have a text storm every now and then, and I think some of these ideas are going to do very well.
Yeah, I want to thank you, because at New Orleans, I basically agreed to buy one of those 1,000-ounce silver bars from you. We got ours, of course, did our unboxing video that you have there on your website. I loved it, but it broke my backpack. I went down. I don't know how the guy got it in from UPS, right? So live in an apartment. They put him in these special lockers. I went to the locker and I was like, oh my God, this is like lifting a bag of concrete. Stuck it in my backpack. The backpack split, the handle broke. And I literally had to drag it over to my apartment because I wasn't going to leave it there, and go get a dolly. So it was just a fun experience having one of those. Totally awesome. And, being a retail investor and having the ability to get one of those bars was just a super exciting experience. I think, Jim, what you're doing at SilverBack is you're taking that big bar and you're saying, well, you may not be able to buy the whole bar, but we can sell it to you in parts. So is that your little workshop back there where you saw the bars up?
Well, yeah, it's not so little. I do want to make one correction. I think you said founder of SilverBack. It's really Dave Holland, who's an ER doc of all things.
Okay.
But a big silver investor.
Mm-hmm.
So it was his idea, and I came along for the ride, so I'm a partner.
Okay.
But yeah, same thing when I met Ian at the conference. He asked Dr. Paul a question about building a parallel system that was based off the Czech president back when they were being oppressed, and that really hit me in all our conversations. So all that he said to me, it's straight back at him, like really man of integrity. And for someone to lend us, like, we have no written paperwork yet, but Ian sent us 2 bars, and here's the end slice off of one that we'll be selling. And these are 4/9 fine. Mm-hmm. And then, so the smallest we can slice reasonably without creating a ton of shavings is about 25 ounces. So Gotcha. We'll have these getting listed for sale. So we got a .p marking system in now, so we can really make nice markings on them with the bar numbers. All the slices get a number that ties back to the bar that was cut up. So you can see, and now that we're working with Ian, we're getting bars from Comex, or the spot market. Mm-hmm. So that's great. I'm ordering, or I just ordered a bunch of equipment so we can do vacuum cast bars, also do silver shot, vacuum cast silver shot. So we're really hoping to ramp this thing up, but it's all going to be sourced off 1,000-ounce bars, cutting them up into smaller products for people. And we plan on having fixed premiums. So if premiums go through the roof again, we're not going to raise our premiums. Instead, we're just going to take more bars.
Awesome. That's awesome to hear. So how do guys who are watching this program interested in getting silver from either one of you, how do they reach out and reach out and say, hey, I saw you on Gold Silver Pros. How do I get involved? How do I get silver?
Yeah. So it's SilverBack Precious Metals. I think I'll work out some sort of system, so that we can know they're coming from them. But for now, what I did do is I put a coupon code of, it's called Old Markings.
Old Markings.
Yeah, we've switched over to a new system of doing the markings with the .p. So we have the old ones that we want to get out of the system so that we can get Ian's bars with the new markings all for sale. So that we're going to do 5% off on those, the ones with the old markings.
Awesome. Well, thank you for offering the special. This has been a great roundtable, by the way. I appreciate talking to all of you. It's interesting to see how we all get into this. I was a technology guy. Ian was in construction. Jim, you're aerospace. George, you're an entrepreneur doing many things in many industries. And we all kind of came together and said, you know what, we believe in gold and silver. And even we got involved in different areas of it. That's also the great thing about it. We each have our, our different role in playing this. And, I hope the conversation was helpful to people out there. I know that we're trying to reach new people every day about gold and silver, the value of gold and silver. And as George mentioned, the ability to play, speculate in that, and the mining into that as well, if you want, the leverage to the gold, silver. So a lot of different options here represented on the program. Thank you, everybody, for joining. I appreciate this. And we look forward to having all of you back on.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much for watching today's video. We appreciate it. Please remember to like, subscribe, and share, and hit that notification button so you get those notifications when new content comes out. If you like what we're doing here, please consider supporting us on Patreon. Those members of Patreon will get extra special content delivered to them as well.